Good evening and welcome to The Right Side. This is the show where we talk about today's issues and trends from an admittedly conservative perspective. I'm your host, Chris Pareja, and tonight we're joined by a very special guest, Tom Tancredo. He's a former U.S. congressman serving in the great state of Colorado, as well as a former presidential candidate and former gubernatorial candidate as well. He's got a long career in politics and is not known for mincing words or keeping his opinions to himself. So we're glad to have you on the show this evening.
Thank you very much. It's
Thanks
a pleasure
for joining
to
us.
join you.
Absolutely. So we talked a little bit before the show, and you'd mentioned that you've been in politics for now 40 plus years.
I have.
When did the bug just initially bite you? Was there a cause?
Well, I've always been very political. I have always been conservative. I have no idea why. My mom worked for Joslin's department store for 45 years as a clerk. My dad at Armour and Company was a packing house until it closed down in Colorado. Then he drove a truck. They were blue-collar people who were really not involved politically. They voted, but really it wasn't a topic of conversation at our house very much. And in those days, believe it or not, the federal government was really a sort of a alien entity. You know, it was way out there. Nobody paid a lot of attention to it. Incredible as that may sound. So I don't know why, but I remember arguing with my teachers in high school, Mrs. Merkel, my social studies teacher in a Catholic school, but she was not a nun. But she and I would go round and round, and I would always, take the conservative point of view. I was teaching ninth grade social studies in Drake Junior High, 1975. I tell my students one day, look, I'm trying to get them involved, trying to get them, come on, get in, extra credit, just get into somebody's campaign, do something. Ninth graders, they're going, yeah. And one of them says to me, Mr. Tancredo, what are you doing? And I said, I have to get back to you with that.
Out of the mouths of babes.
Exactly. And so next day or two, I came back with what I thought was a foolproof idea. I said, tell you what, if every one of you, 32 kids thinking, no way is that going to happen, but I'll get 10. If every one of you in this class will get involved in somebody's campaign or on some issue, because in Colorado, like California, we have a lot of issues on the ballot. I said, but you have to also tell me something. You can't just go, I'm for Fred. You got to say, here's why. Give me a little something, one sentence. If everybody will do that, get involved on a campaign. I said, ninth graders, you can be involved. Wave signs, like envelopes, knock on doors. You can be influential. 2 weeks later, I said, by the way, if you all do that, the other end of that was, I'll run for office and show you how this is from the beginning.
Yes. Okay.
And so 2 weeks later, the 32nd kid, I still know his name, said, turned in this stuff. So I put a list on the board for all the things that I could run for. And I explained a little bit about what city council, mayor, state legislator, on up. And then they voted. And they voted that I should run for the state legislature. And I think they did that because they thought that would keep me away longer than anything else. And so I did. And the rest, as they say, is history.
And you won that election?
I won that election.
So how much of your platform was designed by those students at that day?
Okay, probably all of it, because I really didn't have a platform, but I went down to Republican headquarters. This was right after Watergate. We had gotten wiped out. Right? Lost the state legislature. The incumbent Democrat had lost. The incumbent Republican had lost. Democrat I was going to be running against, brand new and everything. I go down to Jefferson County Republican headquarters, and I said, look, I did this thing. I told my students, but I got to do it. I said, there'll be a primary. I won't win it. It'll be all over with. But I told them, and I show them kind of how it works from the ground up. And, he's shaking my hand and taking my pulse. At the same time. You're great. You're just the guy we're looking for.
That's how we do it here, too. They didn't fog you with the mirror, though, right?
Fog a mirror. I could fog a mirror. And so pretty soon, there was no primary. I was the nominee. So I had to go to my parents, and I said, I need your help. I can't, I said, I can't do this. I can't leave school. I mean, what am I going to do here? And yet I'm going to be the nominee of the party. So they said, well, what do you want us to do? We don't know. We'll make up a little card, which we did. It said, Tancredo, on the front, Tancredo recipe for spaghetti sauce. My mother, literally, honest to God, kitchen table, sitting there, one night, writing this stuff out. Other side of the card, it said, Tom Tancredo's recipe for good government. A dash of integrity, a spoonful of honesty. It was the hokiest thing you have ever seen in your life. So every day they'd go out, my campaign manager, who was another teacher at the building, would hand, and I mean, I wouldn't belong to the union. I'm a conservative from the get-go. And they'd go out every day and hand out these cards. One day my father says to me, I've quit, I've had it. And I said, can't do that. What do you mean you quit? He said, I'm not going. I said, why? He said, because every day it's the same thing. I go up my side of the block. I hand out my cards. I knock on the door, give them the card. I get to the top of the block. I look across the street, your mother's not there. I walk across to her side of the block. I start knocking on doors, handing out her card. She's at the first house going, but he's such a good boy. I said to my mom, you got to kick it up, Mom, Dad's going to quit. She goes, well, Tommy, I don't know. People ask me what he believes in and everything, and I tell him, I don't really know a lot about politics, but he's a good boy. So I said, who's going to vote against a good boy? Go right ahead. First, this is the last part of the story. I give a speech. First speech as the newly elected state representative, by God. And then I walk off the stage, and some guy says to me, who are you anyway? And I said, well, I'm Tom Tancredo. I'm the state representative, new state representative. He goes, what happened to that older guy I voted for? Because he voted for my dad. And I think all the rest voted for my mom. But I won.
Well, it doesn't matter as long as the votes come your way, right?
It was.
Well, that's incredible. So you went from the state legislature and then progressed?
Then in 1981, I ran 2 more times. I was elected both times. And by this time, I mean, I was already known as one of the House crazies. We were the most conservative guys that ever came into the state legislature in Colorado. And it was great, had a lot of fun. And still, I'm sure, called crazy plenty of times. In fact, a couple nights ago on Hannity, somebody called me that. At any rate, the 1981, 1980, I was a Reagan delegate, and went to the committee. I was a surrogate speaker for him. So after the election, I get this call, and the guy goes, "Would you like to? Your name has been given to us. Someone might want to serve in this administration." I said, "Me? Are you kidding?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, yeah. Who do I have to kill? I mean, what? Yeah, I'll do it." And he goes, "Yeah." Well, I said, "They said Department of Education," and I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, don't take this wrong, please. I'm flattered and everything, but because you're a teacher, and I was also the chairman of the Education Committee in the state legislature. So I said, don't take this wrong. I really am flattered, but no thanks." And he goes, "Why?" And I said, "Because I don't believe we should have a U.S. Department of Education." Mm-hmm. The guy goes, "That's why we're calling you."
And see, that's something that I think is also important. A lot of times, people who are politically active they're more focused on fighting the organization as opposed to going inside and making the positive change. And what you realize after being in politics for a little while or around it, the best place to make the change is from the inside.
It's also very frustrating because you come in as a political appointee. Great. You have I had 223 people I have to be careful. 223 people employed there in the regional office of the U.S. Department of Education. I was the regional director, okay? Some of those people were actually working there.
I was wondering if that was the differentiation. Yes, they're being paid.
Oh, yeah.
Are they working?
Oh, yeah. But that bureaucracy, it took me 4 years, and I got it from 223 to 60. And I used to ask people all the time, every time I give a speech, I'd say, I've gone down 80% in my office here. 80% of my employees are gone. Has anybody been able to tell the difference? Not one human being ever said to me, "Oh, yeah, that service from the regional office has just been terrible." No. And if we went to 0, you wouldn't know. And that's what I kept trying to explain to them. But trying to get rid of people in the federal government, and as I say, they're there forever, and they know it. You're transitory,
Right.
So it's a tough job. Even though when we go, look what Obama's doing with the EPA. Right now the rules were just written out, really designed to actually put every coal company out of business.
Yes.
Right? And we're hoping, those of us who feel that that's a stupid idea, are hoping that, of course, if Romney wins the election and he puts in a new EPA director, that'll all change. Well, let me tell you, you have changes there at that level, but getting them to sink into that bureaucracy, an enormous challenge.
Right. It is of major concern. So you've started to touch on the president a little bit, and you start talking about regulation. And I know it's been a flavor of the day for things that are coming through recently. We've got the decision from Judge Roberts that is made.
But you said president, you mean the dictator in chief, right?
You make definitely.
And you can use the acronym. I don't care.
Yeah. Yes. But looking at that, and your hallmarks and what you're known for is illegal immigration and being a proponent of true immigration reform and making things a little bit saner, as well as anti-terrorism. Talk to me a little bit about what you feel about this Amnesty Junior program that's happening and things such as not only Amnesty Cities, which I know you are against, but now we're moving toward Amnesty States, especially here in California.
Right. This is one of the most interesting and I think intellectually stimulating topics. I'll put it this way, intellectually stimulating public policy issues that anybody can really get involved with, because it touches on so many aspects of our life, of our society. Immigration, legal and illegal. You want to talk about education problems? I'll talk about education problems. It's California, my gosh. Need I say more? You're trying to educate a lot of people in these schools who are not English proficient, number one, whose parents are low-income, low-wage workers and are not paying the freight for the experience. They're holding down, you got so many children in that category that you're holding down the learning of the actual learning ability of the children from the rest of the class. Enormous costs we incur. You want to talk about medical problems, the problems with our healthcare system, right? Enormous costs in the healthcare system. Go to I don't have to tell anybody in California these horror stories, right? You know what it's costing us. Billions and billions of dollars it costs taxpayers to support the infrastructure for people who are here illegally.
Yes.
And that's billions above whatever taxes are paid by the group that I just described, low-income, low-wage workers. Then there's another side of it, and that is the culture itself. We are balkanizing America. We are, immigration can be a very productive thing and a very healthy and salutary thing. It can also be a very disastrous thing. It depends on a lot of things.
Right.
And Obama, the dictator-in-chief, knows that the people coming in, both legally and illegally, are nothing more than undocumented Democrats in his mind, and is going to do everything possible to, number one, stimulate the base by, making this one of his signature issues, and two, trying to replenish that pool of potential voters. And so, therefore, he does these things. He will, by the way, I should say, I want to hasten to add here, I wish it were just a problem with Democrats. The
Republican Party has its share.
Man, listen, I had to, listen to and be on the stage with a guy by the name of John McCain throughout that process of the 2007 Republican primary. And nobody was worse than he was. I always said, I have two problems in Congress trying to do anything about immigration. One is with the Democrat Party, that sees these people as nothing more than undocumented Democrats. The Republican Party that sees the same group of people as cheap laborers. And as a result, you had this blockage. Nobody wanted to address it on either side.
Right.
And so I was, needless to say, persona non grata in my own party, as much as I was probably with the other side. Right. But it's a huge problem, and it's a problem not just with the economy. 8-9 real unemployment. What, 13%?
14.9 if you track U6.
14.9% unemployment, and we're bringing in 1.2 million people legally every year.
Right.
We can't create. We have to create about 200,000. The private sector
Yeah.
200,000
I've
jobs
heard numbers
a month.
up to 400,000 a month, and now we're getting 80,000, and a third of those are temps.
Exactly. And in these and what's the immigration policy of the United States today? It is not based on, and it hasn't been for 40 years, on our need. Who do we need? Do we need capital investment? Do we need engineers, doctors? Who do we need? Right? That has nothing to do with the policy. The policy is, if you're here, we're going to give you what's called family unification status, and that means you bring in the same people. Now, many of them wonderful people. Nobody's arguing the integrity of many of the individuals that come, hardworking and all that. You can't make public policy for a country based on that kind of anecdotal almost information about, well, some of these people are really coming for the right reason. Well, yeah, but many aren't. There is no assimilation going on today to the extent necessary. There isn't enough, I should say. And we tell people that are coming here that they shouldn't assimilate. We will teach you in a language other than English. We will encourage you to stay separate, not to have any connection to America, at least not the America that the founders put together.
Right.
This is very destructive. That's why I say the whole picture, Chris, is one of fascination. I am amazed. I'm fascinated by it because the impact of immigration on America will be significant, and has been and will be significant.
And you didn't mention a couple of the big factors, especially on the illegal immigration side. You didn't mention border security. Mm-hmm. You didn't mention the increase in crime rates, the kidnapping, the human trafficking, the drug trafficking, and all of those other things that are there, not to mention terrorist cells being trained on our southern border, because we're known globally for having a weak southern border. It's not just an anti-Hispanic problem that we're trying to address.
Sick of that Hispanic thing. I mean, if Italy, all right, I am 100% Italian by ethnicity. If Italy were on our southern border and was economically in the same situation, we'd be facing the same problem, and I would be just as upset about it. But because it's Hispanic, we end up with the other side always trying to divert the attention away from the real issue to the issue of racism. And I'll tell you, for me personally, I know where my heart is. I know who I am,
right?
And racism isn't a part of it.
Well, and the other factor is, and like you, I don't care if they come from the Ukraine or from Asia, because the actual Asian population is outpacing the Hispanic population coming in. But what's interesting is we're not looking at the ramifications of illegal immigration on those specific types of minority classes. I prefer to look at people by the content of their character as well. But when we're looking at a lot of the Hispanic population being labeled as the predominant illegal immigrant, you look at people who may be discriminated against because of association. So people that have worked hard to come into the country, they've done it the right way, or they were born here or whatever, may be discriminated against because they're not sure if paperwork is in order or whatever. It brings crime into their communities with the human trafficking and everything else, and the forgeries, the identity thefts. It becomes a much larger issue.
I tell my opponents on this all the time, I'd be happy to put this up for a referendum if they would too. And the only people getting to vote on it, and the issue of open borders, amnesty, all the rest of it, but the only people getting to vote on it are legal immigrants in the United States. And I don't care where they were from, Mexico or Ukraine, as you say. I don't care. You let them vote and tell me how they feel about the fact that they had to go through what they went through to get here. And when I hear people drag up this fairness argument all the time, well, it isn't fair. Some kid came here. It wasn't his fault. The parents made a decision. Yeah, right. You tell me what's fair about having a person spend years in the queue, thousands of dollars in the process, all the brain damage that goes along with that, to become a legal citizen and do it the right way. We give them some goodies. We give more to the people who have come in here. If I get arrested, if I get stopped in Colorado and I don't have a driver's license and I don't have a insurance or registration for my car, I could easily go to jail. I will certainly get a big fine.
And your car will be confiscated.
My car will be gone. If I'm illegal, I walk.
You do. And you get to keep your car.
So please explain this to me, Lord. I'm having a hard time understanding.
Yeah, and so then you must be really excited about the fact that Obama has, or the administration has taken Arizona to task and to court, sure. And has, even though they're the main component of their law, being able to ask for ID when someone commits a crime,
is a law.
Yeah.
It is a federal law. Section 8 of something is you must carry your papers if you're here. If you're here as an immigrant.
Well, and also just by reading the legislation, the 28 pages of the Arizona law, I read it when it was passed, and
which is more than the president did or Eric Holder.
That's exactly right. But if all they had to do was show an ID, and that would be the end of the story, because if they've obtained it legally, it shows up in the driver's license database, then they must be okay. So I would assume you object to him saying that if it's not a serious felony, we already know that they've committed, that you just let them walk?
This president, I cannot begin to say on television probably what I think about him and what he is doing to this country, except to say that he deserves impeachment. Regardless of whether or not we're able to beat him in the election, he deserves to be impeached. He has committed so many impeachable offenses that it's hard to keep track of him. I actually do a column once a week for WorldNet Daily, and I did a column about, 6 months ago, saying, for these reasons, he should be impeached. I had to do another one after that and a third one because he keeps doing things.
Right.
We don't recognize it. You forget about it. He did one thing today and you think, oh my gosh, and then they pile it on. As you said before, Saul Alinsky's plan, overwhelm the system with it. And if we don't impeach him, here's the thing. What about the next dictator-in-chief? Look what the precedent that has been set by this guy.
Right.
It's absolutely horrible. He is a disaster for America, for the America that I love, for the America that the founders put together. He has a totally different opinion and design for America. And to me, it's frightening.
Well, we appreciate your obvious passion and your willingness
it's
to...
Italian, I told you.
You didn't use your hands enough to be fully
Italian.
I'm guessing you're less than 70%. but we appreciate the show, taking the time for the show. We know you have a very busy schedule and more speaking and engagements this evening. So thank you, Tom, for spending the time with us.
It's been a pleasure.
Hold tight while we take a word from our underwriter, the Conservative Forum.
I'm a constitutional law attorney. They say, oh really, what kind of constitutional law attorney? I say, well, I'm the kind of the true kind. The kind that believe that the Constitution is what the Constitution says and what it was intended to say. Anything beyond that is tyranny and should not be allowed.
So it's come to this, my friends. You ready the second American Revolution against a ruling class that simply lectures but does not listen or defend the American people? It is government versus the people. Am I right? Yeah. Look at the Electoral College example. Right? A leftist popular challenge to states' rights. You think the founders weren't brilliant people? Did they not know what they were doing by carefully calibrating to get the small states and the big states to come together? Why does Wyoming get 2 senators in California? Actually, I'd rather have Wyoming's 2 senators.
and welcome back. We'd like to thank, at every episode, our underwriters, the Conservative Forum, but they do much more than just sponsor the show for us. They also present a lot of great content. This evening, for example, they'll be having Tom Tancredo speak there about the culture and its impact on society and those changes that need to be made. August 7th, they'll be having Jack Cashel speak. On September 11th, which is normally the first Friday of the first Tuesday of the month. It'll be the second Tuesday in September. September 11th, it'll be John Fund. On October 2nd, Jesse Lee Peterson. On November 6th, Election Watch. We'll be watching the election results come in, and then December 4th will be Christmas dinner. You can find out more at theconservativeforum.com. But additionally, the meetings do take place at the Portuguese Hall at 432 Steerlin Road here in Mountain View. And just in closing this evening, Tom and I touched briefly on some of the circumstances that have come lately and about how the laws are being circumvented. And for example, even though the constitutionality of the Arizona law, the major components of it, and being able to ask for ID were upheld, that the federal government is starting to implement the policy of letting people go if they haven't been able to be proven of a serious felonious offense before that particular interaction with law enforcement. We have to be very vigilant and very careful about who's entering our country and why. Do they mean to do us harm, or will they contribute and help out? Because as we would like to think that everyone is here for reasons of making a better life for their family, there are criminals that are running loose within our borders for reasons that are more nefarious, and they must be stopped. We need to know who's in the country and why they're here. So on that note, I'd like to say thank you for joining us again on The Right Side, and we look forward to hearing from you or interacting with you via video sometime soon. I'm Chris Pareja. Thanks again.